All right. So today we start the QLab Remote. Those of you who haven't yet quite finished your cable checker, that's fine. You can keep working on that if you want to, or come back to it or whatever. But ultimately, I need to see a functioning cable checker from you before the end of the semester. Does anybody still owe me cables? I think we got through everybody's cables, right? I don't. Okay, good. So hopefully your cable checker is done. If it's not done, then hopefully you're close. But some of you are done, so we're going to at least get them started on the QLab Remote. So this is basically, this is what we're making, okay? So this is what it is going to end up looking like. Now, I'm going to let you drill the holes for this, just because there's not as many holes to drill as the cable checker. You have a couple of options. I mean, well, I'll let you decide how you want to lay out your buttons. Here's one option. The idea is go, panic, next queue, previous queue. You can also run it this way. Go, panic, next queue, previous queue. Here's another example. Go, panic, next, previous. You can also rotate it this way. And it'll be go, panic, next, previous. The main thing is there's this big USB thingy that has to go inside the box, okay? And you got to make room in your hole pattern for it. So in this case, for like this one, the USB thing is going to sit there. See, inside the box, because the switches will stick out enough below the inside the box it'll touch, and you don't want that. So however you decide to lay out your holes, you just got to figure out where you're going to put this big USB adapter. In this case, I've got it going here. Okay, so like here's the box for that pattern, right? See, or here's the box for this pattern. Weird angle. See? So I'll let you figure this out. You can decide where you want to lay all this out, and when you're ready to drill, let me know, and I'll take you over there and show you. So we'll get to the switches in a second, but I want to start by showing you how to solder the board. So you're each going to get one of these inside this little shrink wrap thingy. And this is what we're going to be working with. This is a little tiny computer. It's called the Itsy Bitsy by Adafruit. And it is literally just a tiny, tiny little computer. It's got a little USB port on it, a little processor chip, and a little bit of storage, so it can store code basically, and a lot of input-output pins that do different things. So because it's a little computer, you want to be very careful about static electricity. So try to just touch it on the edges. Try not to like pinch it and touch the chips and stuff, just in case you are carrying a little static electricity. You don't want to like shock the thing, and then it doesn't work anymore. Okay, so just be mindful of that. Hold it around the edges as much as possible. We need to solder this thing, okay, and it's got to be careful. So we're going to take you through it. Inside the bag here are these little pins, and if you look here, well, actually, before I show you this, let me show you the picture. Okay, here's basically what we're going to do. I have one for each of you. Passing those around. There's the Itsy Bitsy, and I'm showing you which pins you're going to solder things up to, so on and so forth. Okay, so you can follow this description. But before we get to that, we have to actually do the board. So if you look at the board, there are little holes all the way around. We're not going to use these ones on the edge, so you don't have to worry about those. But ultimately, you want to take the short side of these little pins, and stick it in through the bottom like that. And if you do that, you'll realize you got 2 extra ones, okay? So we're going to go ahead and break off the 2 that we don't need. Okay, off of that one. And we'll do the same thing with my other. With this one, we'll break off the 2 we don't need. They just bust right off, okay? And then what we're going to do is I'm going to give you one of these little prototyping breadboards. If you don't already know what you're going to make, this can be a really helpful way. You can like just stick components in without having to solder them and just test stuff out, which is what I did when I was trying to figure out how to build this thing. But since I've already given you the diagram and you already know what you're going to do, we can skip this part. But we're going to just use the prototyping board for to solder the chip in. So you just got to figure out which holes you're going to stick this in. And you insert the headers in there and then slide that on there. Okay, now you want to make sure you get it all the way so it's touching that plastic. Okay, you don't want any gaps between the thing. Okay, now let's see if I can. I played around with this camera this morning and I think I figured out the focus. Kinda. So can I get any closer? Okay, so that's all right. So you're going to get, this is a different spool of solder that's much thinner. We've been using that for your board, right? So we're going to use that here. Now what you want to do is, the most important pins are the ones closer to the USB, so maybe start on the other end, just in case you have trouble. But here's what you're going to do. You're going to stick the soldering iron up against the little hole in the pin, and as it starts heating up, you dab a little solder and you wait for it to fall into that little hole. And then you go to the next one and do the same thing. You don't want to overdo it, just enough to seal that little hole. There it goes. And once you get to these ones that are A2, 3, 4, and 5, those are ones we're using for the project, so don't screw those ones up. All right. Clean my tip a little bit here. All right. Obviously, you're still going to use your pointy tip. Yeah, there we go. Get in there. There it goes. So you're watching for that moment when the solder kind of just drops into the little pin, into the hole. And make sure you're cleaning your tip every few times just so you don't end up with solder collecting. It's not quite going, is it? I got that one. Okay. So let me take a look at these and make sure I'm missing. I think on this SCK one, I didn't quite do as good a job on that. So I'm going to come back and hit that one. There we go. And I hit that 3 volts again. Okay, perfect. So let me just let you see this now. Don't overdo it. Just enough solder for it to drop into the hole. Not too much, and they'll start shorting together, and that is bad. Okay? I'm going to come around and I'm going to do the other side now. And then I'll show you the next step. And this is where I really need to get my magnifying glass. But yeah. So be very careful not to touch your soldering iron to any of the chips or anything. Okay? Just be mindful of where it is. You want to go pretty quick on these, okay? Don't let your soldering iron sit on that tip so long that you start melting the board. The board's designed to take this heat, but, you know, it has limits. So see how quickly I'm going here? That's the idea. All right, so hopefully that goes well, and I'm just going to check them all here. I'm going to hit that ground one more time. I don't think I got quite enough solder on that one. That's better. Now, something you're going to want to do is, go ahead and get your meter out now, set it to continuity, and just make sure that you know, you don't want to get any, there shouldn't really be any continuity on any of these except these two should be together because they're just a duplicate of the same pin, the 3 volts and the A ref. But aside from that, you just make sure that you haven't shorted anything, okay? So now that we got that, now you can get the actual board, which is going to be this. And you can now pull your chip out, and you want to orient the board so that there's a little pin here called G that's next to that USB. And you want to make sure that that's oriented to the side of the board that's nearest that negative rail, because you're going to put that together. And you line this up about like that, and now you got to solder the other side. Okay, now here's the trick. You want to keep it flush up against the board. Okay, so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to rotate my clamp here, and then I'll move the camera. Let's see. Well, just have some, because it grips the pins, so it just keeps it in place. Okay, but now that you've got it soldered in there, you don't need that, because it's loose otherwise. Let's see if I can get you a good view here. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this in here. So that I have something to hang on to. Yeah. Okay, so I'm just going to line this up, and I'm going to grip it. Okay, not not too tight. Just enough to hold it in place. Okay, and then you're going to lay this across here. Make sure that you've got the pins in the right spot. And you want to make sure this is laying flat, okay? Don't let it jump up, okay? Make sure it's staying flat. So there's that G pin, and they're labeled on this other side as well. So the one labeled G, that side needs to be pointed towards this blue negative rail, okay? If you get it backwards, it's not the end of the world, but it'll just mean you gotta relabel my drawing, okay? And it doesn't really matter, where along here you put it. Just make sure you have at least one row of holes, you know, available on the outside, okay? But aside from that, it doesn't really matter. And now we do the same thing as before, just on the other side, okay? So while I've got this laying down here, I'm gonna just heat it up, let it drop in, done, okay? And just to make sure it doesn't jump out, I'm gonna go ahead and come over here and tack this one down. Okay, that way I know I've got it laying flush. Okay, and now I'll just start working my way down until I pool into every little hole. Go in there. So same thing, you want to go quickly, but you know, not just enough solder to drop into the hole, and you're good. And then eventually you're just going to cut these pins off. Okay. Other questions so far? Everybody feel like you're following along here? All right, I got that side done. So I'm going to come over and I'll do the other side now. Hit that one a little bit more. Okay, that's all right. Again, not too much solder. You don't want to short the rows together. That would be bad. I do not have a whole lot of extra, I only have a couple of extra boards, so we can make a couple of mistakes and that's it. So just be careful, don't do too much solder, just enough to fill the hole, and you're good. And just make sure you're cleaning your tip every once in a while because the solder will collect on there and then you'll start getting globs. Just a little bit more. There we go. Perfect. There. Okay, you see now, notice how there's no gap? That's very, very important. Okay? There you go. This thing's ready to go now. So I'm going to set that aside, and now we can focus on the switches. So once you figure out like where you want to put them and all that, you're going to end up with something like this. Now these switches are interesting because you see how they've got 4 leads on the back of them? That's because there's a light inside. Exactly. So let me see if I can get you from, you see how 2 are shorter? Yeah. Okay, so the 2 that are shorter are for the LED. And the longer ones are for the switch. So for the switch, it doesn't really matter which side goes where. One of them just has to go to the ground, and the other goes to the pin indicated on that thing, okay? But the LED, it very much matters. So one of them is labeled plus, and the other is labeled negative. And on the drawing, I've said LED plus, LED minus. So what we're going to do, I've already done the first three, and I'll just do the other ones now, the last one now, and let you kind of see how this is to be done. So again, I'm going to just use my little clamp. Let me move the camera again. Go. And I'm going to clamp this lid down. Now, again, you don't have to do the same colors that I did, but if you, and because some of the colors we're kind of running out of, I don't know, like white and black. A lot of people used a lot of white and black. So you may not have enough white and black to have your colors be the same as the diagram. Again, it doesn't matter. The wire doesn't care. The wire does not care what color it is. It means common. Yeah. What's that? Normally open. So some of these switches will have 3 tabs on them. You'll have the common, you'll have the normally open, and the normally closed. Normally closed means when you're not pushing the button, the circuit is closed, complete, right? And then when you push it, you break the circuit. But in our case, we want the other way around. We want the circuit to be broken when the button is up, and then when we push it, it connects the wire. That's what we want. So that's what NO means. Normally. So what you're doing is, no, the white ones, the normally open, are going to pins 7, 9, 10, and 11. Okay? And all of the LED minus and the commons are all going to that ground rail.
So why is there a difference between the ground rail and the ground rail?
Because that pin that says G, that's the ground for the computer. Okay, so you got to jump that into your ground rail because you need all of those wires to connect to that G pin because that's the ground for the computer. Okay? Okay, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and start putting this together. Now, looks like I've got the positive on the top here, the negative there, and then the others don't matter. So I'll do my resistor first, because you got to put a resistor in, remember, to soak up some of that extra energy for the LED. So I'm going to go ahead and just get this resistor ready. Like I showed you, I kind of like to make a little loop there just to give me something to grab onto. My cutters. You do. That little wire jump is vitally important. Okay, so first I'm just going to tin each of these terminals with a little bit of solder so stuff will stick. There we go. And I'll go ahead and tin my little loop, my resistor, and then I'm going to get the resistor onto that negative pin.
I meant the wire jump between resistor.
Oh, no, that's just
Visual.
for diagrammatic purposes. But you can solder the resistor directly to the terminal if you want. Okay, and then you will heat shrink around the resistors again. Okay, I haven't done that yet, but okay, so I've got a few wires here, so now I can start working on that. Let me go ahead and get the other side of this resistor ready. Like so. ahead and tin it a little bit. There we go. And I'll got a black wire here ready to go. So I'll strip that.
That tool is so handy.
I'll figure it out in the everybody else.
What the wires for you?
I'll tin the wire. Trim it down to a little nub. And then, got a lot of wires here. I don't want to melt one of them. Okay. There we go. That one's ready. And then I will repeat with the other wires, okay, and get them all on there. And then once you're done with that, you're going to strip all the ends of these wires and solder them to the right holes as diagrammed. So you put them up through the bottom, solder them, and clip them. Okay? Once you have all of that, then you're done with the electrical part. And then what we'd like, if it's possible, I would like to start showing you code next week. So if it's possible for at least for you to get this far, it's nowhere near as much soldering as we did for the cable checker. Okay, I think it's doable. But if you can get this far so that we can then plug it into a computer and I can start showing you the code next week, then we can get moving on that, and that'll give us a couple weeks for us to finish that up, tidy up whatever last thing. Some of you still need to make sound plugs. That'll just take 30 minutes or something. But see if you can get this much done, okay? Don't worry about that USB cable. I'll give you that in a little bit. But this is what you want to have. Yeah.
Do you need to have the switches in before you solder?
Yes.
So
That's,
just drill first.
well, drill before you.
Or
Well, so you just have to have the switches in before you solder them to the board. You can solder the wires onto them first, but once they go into the board, they're not coming out. Okay. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
For the computer chip thing in the circuit board,
Yes.
do you want us to trim off the back pins?
Yes, eventually, yes. So what you'll do is you'll test all these as well,
Okay.
make sure nothing's shorted, just, and then yes, once you're convinced that everything's good, you didn't screw up, then yeah, cut all those off. Okay.
Should you do that before you solder the wires in?
You can or not. I mean, you can do that. I mean, the cutting off of the back is just the last little tidying up to make sure there's nothing sticking out. But so, whenever. Okay. So remember, just handle this with the edges. Try not to touch the chips. And then next week, if you have a laptop that you can bring it, so that we can plug this into your computer to program it. Okay? And if I think about it, I'll try to send you a couple links of the apps to download, so you'll have that ready in that way.
We'll need a little USB.
Yes, so you'll need a little ability to plug in a USB-A cable to your computer, so we can talk to it.
What are the apps?
What's that?
What are the apps?
It's just a code editor called the Moo editor, and a couple of libraries you have to install. But it's no big deal. It's a simple little text editor. But then but I'll take you through the code next week. Okay, that's my plan anyway. Other questions? All right.